Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's design webinar, continuing our theme of design and business software for the month of February. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Jim Gurulé, founder of Bay West Sales and Innovation, as he presents New Opportunities in Kitchen Renovations Circular Economy. Jim, please take it away.
Hi, this is Jim Gurulé, founder of Bay West Sales and Innovation. First of all, I'd like to thank the NKBA and particularly Alicia Kidd and her team. They've just been absolutely fantastic to work with. I'm really excited about what I'm going to share with you. This is something you'll learn later that I've been working on for a number of years. But I'm going to introduce my colleague, Mark, and the two of us are going to spend the next about 45, 50 minutes together going through something that you'll soon find out that I'm not just passionate about, but I'm really excited to share with you today. So thank you so much for your time. It means a lot to me. Hey, Mark, how's it going today?
I'm good, Jim. Hey, thank you for having me. I just wanted everyone to kind of understand who I was. My name again is Mark Aylward. Jim and I go back a number of years, although I'm not a kitchen and bath expert by any means. Jim certainly is. I'm here to help him kind of facilitate the presentation. And I thought we'd start off with a somewhat humorous admission on Jim's part. He describes himself as a self-proclaimed industry zealot. And, he's got a ton of expertise in this area. And just to put some context around that zealot comment, a zealot is someone who is intentionally highlighting their intense passion for their industry. They're acknowledging that their dedication might be seen as excessive by some, but they're also in a way celebrating it. It can be a way of saying, yes, I'm incredibly passionate about this and I'm not afraid to show it. There can be a touch of humor or irony in the phrase, suggesting they're aware of how they might be perceived. So, Jim, I think you start us off with a story, I think, about your mom.
Yeah, it's a visit I had with my mom. And one of the words that you just mentioned was a touch of humor. I think that's something that we're pretty good at doing. We do a weekly podcast and we have some fun. So today we're going to have fun. We're going to laugh. I'm going to laugh at myself, but I say self-proclaimed because I think that's appropriate. This starts off a few days ago. I make it a point to visit my mom once a week. She's about 30 minutes away. And so I walk in the door as I always do. It's the home I grew up in. And she says, "Oh, Jimmy, great to see you. How you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing good." I said, she goes, "What are you up to?" That's what she says. She says, "What are you up to?" I said, "Well, I'm preparing for this talk I have with the NKBA. It's a webinar, and I'm struggling. I'm having a hard time." And she goes, "Well, you don't normally have a hard time speaking to people." I said, "I know, but this is different." She says, "Well, what's it about?" And I said, "It's about the circular economy." And she looked at me and she goes, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, it's something to do with your kitchen, like your old kitchen." And she goes, are you making another tool, like one of your patents that you're going to make a tool?" I said, "Kind of. It's a tool, but this tool is not to install the cabinets. This tool is to uninstall the cabinets." And she looks at me. She goes, "Well, very obviously puzzled." She goes, um, "Are they paying you for this?" I said, "No." And she goes, "Is this another one of those NKBA projects that they don't pay you?" I said, "Yeah, Mom, this is one of those ones, but I get paid in other ways." I go, "So and so then she says, "Okay, well, I'm sure you'll do fine." She goes, "How long have you been working on this?" I said, "Probably about 40 years, give or take a decade." Yeah. So I start that off that way, Mark, because this is probably, again, at least 30, 40 years of knowledge or experiences and that I'm going to share that all comes into this. And as an inventor, there's a process that we go through. And I was looking for a title because I've had different titles throughout my career. And this one, I was again having a hard time preparing. So I did some Google searches and came up with this one, self-proclaimed. Self-proclaimed means that you you self-proclaim it. It actually isn't true until you bring it to the world, until you go to the industry and show it. And then they can tell you whether or not you're no longer self-proclaimed. So let's have some fun with it and get started. But yeah, it starts off with passion about something, the desire to improve it. Obviously, there's dedication. That's what it takes. Innovation, that's what I do. It's something I enjoy. It's in me. and thought leadership. That's why I'm involved in NKBA. And then engagement, which is what the wonderful thing about the National Kitchen and Bath Association and KBIS.
Let me put some context around what we're going to be learning today, Jim. You've got an awful lot up there in that head of yours in regard to this industry. So let me start by telling everybody what they're going to learn about today. And you'll learn all about, hopefully, the emerging circular economy and the new opportunities it brings to the kitchen renovation space. The old way, the linear economy model, was wasteful. It's a buy, use, and dispose model. It's unsustainable, it's costly, and it's becoming increasingly unappealing to particularly environmentally aware clients. The new way, the circular economy model, offers a pretty compelling alternative. So the three specific learning objectives for the webinar, what we'd like you to take away, the three things. Number one, you'll gain a competitive edge and be on the forefront of this transformation by learning how to differentiate your products and services. Number two, you'll learn how 3D capture technologies can be used to create a digital twin of an existing kitchen and then auto-generate the dimensional values needed to begin a kitchen renovation. And then finally, number three, you'll learn the benefits of building a local network of partners. For example, secondary markets, appraisers, nonprofit resellers, et cetera, to facilitate the repurposing process and meet government requirements. Let's jump in, Jim.
Well, Mark, let's start off by talking about the inflection point. First of all, what is an inflection point? What does it mean? There's actually 3 inflection points going on that we'll cover over the next 45 minutes. But the word inflection point has many different meanings. I thought we'd start off. I'm going to share a quick story, and then I'll let you read the definition. But an inflection point is when a number of things happen at the same time, and the one that most of us are familiar with, since I live here in the San Francisco Bay Area, obviously there's a lot of innovation, but the Uber story was an inflection point when the cell phone, the mobile phone, was becoming popular. This is, again, 10 or 15 years ago. But it wasn't just the mobile phone. It was actually the technology in the mobile phone with the GPS. And the ability of that is what Uber, which now is rideshare, changed an industry. And it was this guy in San Francisco trying to catch a cab. And he was frustrated because the cabs were driving by and they wouldn't stop. So then he started to try to schedule cars in advance, a black car. And that was the technology where the GPS was able to identify where the passenger, the rider, was, and then connect it with the car. And the rest is history. But there was an inflection point that was going on at that time that created an entirely new industry. And again, I'll share 3 different inflection points, but that gives a general idea of what we'll be talking about and how things will come together. But yeah, Mark, why don't you read the definition inflection point? Because I think, again, it's just a high level idea of what is happening, what I'll be sharing today.
Yeah, no, happy to. I think in inflection point in technology anyway, it refers to a critical moment like you were describing, Jim, when a significant change or a disruption occurs in a technology, and typically marks a shift in its trajectory, and it often signifies the transition from a niche concept to a more wider spread adoption. And of course, Uber is pretty widespread, as we know now. And it impacts the industry landscape considerably. It's essentially a turning point. So, Jim, as you were about to tell us, please do more about why the kitchen renovation business is at such an inflection point.
Yeah, again, there's 3. So the first one is this linear economy as we're changing to the circular economy. And I'll come back to that in a second. And also this is back to the consumer buying behaviors. They're changing rapidly based on generation and their desire to be sustainable. And then the third one is the technology. And this is what I'm most excited about. It's artificial intelligence, of course. That's a huge part of it, but it's this 3D capture technology where we can simply take a mobile phone, wave it in front of a kitchen, and then do a scene reconstruction. Basically, create a 3D digital model of that kitchen. That is so valuable in our industry, especially early on. And the homeowner actually will have that ability right now, and even as time goes on, that will become more and more common of how they collect the information. But let's talk about the linear. Before we talk about the circular economy, I think it's important to talk about the old linear economy. And again, I say this with all respect. I was very fortunate to be part of this linear economy. I sold a lot of cabinets, and everything I do is related to this linear economy. But it's on simple terms, it's where we take something, a raw resource. If it's making cabinets, it's a lot of trees, obviously, and then we make something, and then we dispose of it, and that happens over and over and over again. That's the world we live in now, and that's just simply not sustainable. The circular economy is different, where you're making things, but from the inception, they have another destination and not directly to landfill. So it's part of from the beginning thinking this. This applies to everything. Of course, today we're going to talk about kitchen renovation and how you, as an architect, a designer, a contractor, are the influencers of this and can make a huge impact on what happens with this.
So Jim, I know you joked earlier about being a self-proclaimed zealot, but on a more serious note, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you gained this knowledge and insight, and then I can talk a little bit about our work together. But yeah, how'd you get all this knowledge? How'd you gain all this insight?
Yeah, I'll describe this actually in a number of NKBA. That's why I refer to them as NKBA stories. And there's several of them, but the first one was when I was a cabinet maker. I was making cabinets, and I realized, hey, this is it's not an easy way to make a living. I was supporting myself, and I saw this article in the back of a KBB magazine. It was advertising for an NKBA basic design course, and I had tried to get another job, designing kitchens and selling kitchens, but that was difficult because I had no experience. So I sent myself to this NKBA basic design class. It was taught by David Newsom, I believe, and it was David Newsom CKD. And I was able to obtain this certification, this little piece of paper that said I had completed this. So with that piece of paper, I was able to get my first job from making cabinets to actually designing kitchens. And it was really a changing point in my life. And it hadn't been for the NKBA, I think it would have been very different. And so that's one of my first NKBA story, and the value of what they offer in relationship to education. So that's how I started off my career as a cabinet maker. But then if you look at the screen, I had also many other roles in this industry. My core business was Bay West Sales Innovation, where I represented cabinet manufacturers. I've sold probably close to $500 million worth of cabinets over my 2.5 decades of experience. And I represented many national brands such as Diamond Cabinets, Schuler Cabinets, Plato, Medallion, Sur Supreme, a number of different companies, and develop products. So that was my core business. But my passion, which is now my main focus, is innovation. And so I have 5 U.S. patents, or I have 5 patents that have been issued in my name as a sole inventor. Some of those have expired. And what I'm going to share with you today is very, very much the same thing, as you'll see as we go through the program. And then, of course, Mark, we do a weekly podcast, you and I do. And I'll let you say a little bit about that, about the podcast, and then we'll get into the last one.
Yeah, no, I think the what's interesting to me, among many things, is one of the reasons I'm here is to help and collaborate and facilitate. But Jim and I have known each other for coming up on, I think, 6 years now, and we do host a podcast together called the Imperfect Men's Club. Focuses mostly on what men are doing in midlife, entering into midlife and existing in midlife, and the challenges. And we have a lot of fun with it because it's pretty easy to make fun of middle-aged men. But I'm also been an entrepreneur my whole life, and all of my time has been spent in the technical space. So this notion of an inflection point and the idea of taking advantage of it, recognizing it for what it is, when it is, and responding to it with a sense of urgency. Very empathetic with that. I've seen multiple inflection points with technology over about 35 years. So I'm very interested, Jim, in how you think your audience might be able to leverage these inflection points and these trends in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's why I saved this last one. Well, it's my holistic view of the industry, right? As a cabinet maker, I saw how things were made, and then how things were installed, and this comes from something that I just recently started to talk about, because it was in most of my life quite embarrassing. But I'm dyslexic, Mark, and I don't know if you know what that means, but a dyslexic person. Neurodiverse is what they refer to it as now, processes information very, very differently. And that can be difficult when it comes to reading and writing. But when it comes to innovation and seeing things, we think in concepts instead of in words. We also process information very, very fast, sometimes 6 to 1,000 times faster than just a normal person. Again, that's really good when you're looking at big picture stuff and you're innovating. It's really difficult when you're trying to write or read. So that's something I've struggled with all my life. However, I also learned how to self-educate, which is referred to as autodidactic. I'm an autodidactic learner, meaning that I'd learn by watching and listening. Again, back to my NKBA story. If it hadn't been for the NKBA, I sat in a class, it was like a 2-day class. I can process information by learning, interacting, and even drawing the kitchens by hand back then. That was a process that I learned from the very, very beginning of how things fit together. And that's also applies to my clamps. We also, dyslexics, see things in 3 dimensions. So when average person sees kind of just 2 dimensions, we see all these other things and their context in relationship to one another. And that comes very natural to me. But that's again, it's not something that is. It can be difficult in other parts of my life. But yeah, as a cabinet manufacturer representative, I've represented a number of different manufacturers. So I've had this really unique perspective of all the different manufacturers and how things are made, but also the things that are their commonalities and then, but most importantly, working with hundreds, if not more, of kitchen designers and their needs, along with contractors and architects. I'm also a licensed contractor. So just give you a background of, again, how I see things, and I see opportunities.
So let's take that. I mean, that's a very, very interesting career trajectory that I'm pretty familiar with, Jim, to be fortunate to say. But let's put it into some macroeconomic context. What are the numbers? What are the opportunities in this space? And I've got some bullets here, if I may. Approximately 145 million homes exist right now in the United States, and that's a Google data point. About 140 billion in annual renovation spending, which is projected to increase to 199 billion over the next 7 years. 50% of U.S. homes are 20 plus years old, and 61% of American homeowners would rather renovate than move. Kitchen renovations drive the bulk of home improvement projects. Approximately 2.5 million kitchen renovation projects were completed in 2024, which is an NKBA stat. Residential kitchen remodel U.S. spend was approximately 36.1 billion. That's also a 2024 NKBA stat. And then finally, 1 in 10 homes are considering a kitchen renovation project. So you don't have to be a mathematician to see the potential of that market, Jim.
Yeah, Mark, I'll take you again what I refer to as the innovator's mind, right? There's a process that I go through. For example, the step 1 is the research, and that's what we're sharing right now. We're going to talk about the research, the size of the market, understand the different user stories in that. That's step 1. Step 2 is you start to prototype something. So it's an iteration of mock-ups and designs. Step 3 is what we're just talked about. Try to recognize inflection points. What's different now than it was before? Step 4 is really understand the customer journey and how this fits into what is available now and what could be available in the future. And then the step 5 is commercialization, bring it to the market. So what I'm sharing today is based on that process, what I refer to as the inventor's mind. So now we're going to talk about the numbers that we just discussed in relationship to the circular economy and deconstruction. And this is where you start to see that the impact in terms of the sustainability. But just to go back to the numbers that you just shared with us, Mark, you could tell that's a big problem, right? There's a number of products that are being put into landfill, and only 1% of those is being diverted from landfill.
Well, you got the interesting part is you spent your life, as it seems, in the construction side, and now we're talking about the deconstruction side. So I have some facts regarding that as well. About 50%, so 1.2 million projects undergo a major renovation that includes the complete removal of the cabinets, aka deconstruction. Typical L-shaped kitchen includes 15 cabinets per kitchen, which means that 18 million cabinets are removed each year. Fredonia Group, the demand from Fredonia Group stat in 2024 for kitchen cabinets is 83 million units. Less than 1% of these projects are diverted from landfills, as you suggested earlier. An average 40-foot truck holds 200 cabinets. So picture almost 100,000 trucks lined up each year waiting to dump their cabinet load into the landfill. And then finally, EPA construction and demolition debris contributes to 660 million tons of construction debris produced annually in the United States alone.
Yeah, it's a lot, Mark. I'm going to flip back to this screen here just for a second, and this gives you an idea that when the light bulb went off in my mind, right? This is, and again, another short story. I was repping a manufacturer, and this customer was very upset about their cherry wood cabinet doors, and there was a streak of wood, a mineral streak. And this happened several times, but this particular time it bothered me. And she wanted all the doors replaced because of this mineral streak. And as a rep, that was my job to decide whether that was the right thing to do. And I gave her what she wanted, what the dealer wanted, and we replaced all the doors. And they came out, and the second set of doors she didn't want. And then I started to realize this is happening a lot. Right. That's nature. That's what nature looks like. And so I had this epiphany. It was kind of back to the inventor mind of mine. It's like, wow, that's a lot of stuff. So then I started the research process, and that's when the light bulb went off. And that's what you see on your screen. That's happening a lot. But I needed the data. I needed the data to demonstrate to myself that this is a problem worth solving. And then I did the conversions. And as I do, the arithmetic started to really tell the story. So I did conversions from what you shared before. And then I started doing the conversions in relationship to cabinets, and 18 million cabinets a year go straight to landfill. These are just, again, I did some calculations, but this is very conservative math. And then the one that I think it bothered me, and it should bother anybody, only 1% of that is being diverted. I would never consider myself an environmentalist, but I think that's just common sense, right? And maybe I am more of an environmentalist than I realize, but it's not about just this just doesn't make sense. And then when I started to find out that there's other options that we'll share later on in the presentation. But yeah, then as a cabinet manufacturer's rep, I would sell truckloads of cabinets. So for example, if I represented a factory in the Midwest and they were shipping a truck, sometimes 2 trucks a week from Minnesota to California, that's about 200 cabinets per truck. And so the calculation I did was 100,000 trucks a year are going straight to landfill. landfill. And the other thing I mentioned too, when I do these calculations, 50% of all kitchen renovations actually aren't replacing the cabinets. They're what I refer to as a minor or a mid-level kitchen. So it's there's other options in terms of kitchen renovation. So, but yeah, this is also part of a subset, Mark. The EPA reports, this is actually a few years old, so it's much greater than this. Back in 2018, they did a calculation, and 66 million tons of waste directly related to construction demolition debris goes straight to landfill. So once I started to quantify the problem, then things really started to make more sense as far as the solutions that were available or not available.
The sustainability piece, the environmental piece, is compelling unto itself. But what's also interesting, what you're about to move into here, is this whole the consumer, the buying behavior, and so not being sustainable, that's one thing, but the fact that people's buying behaviors are changing as well. And you've got a cool chart here that's shades of green, Jim. Talk a little bit about buying behavior.
Yeah, the buying behavior really it's again, it's back to that inflection point. I refer to it as the green in the green, right? There's real money in the green, but in the past, there's been a lot of greenwashing, and it's not really that having much of an impact. But I thought that this statistic here really tells the story. It turns out that this generation of our population, we call it light green, mint green. They don't care that much about the environment. It's just not something that's been part of how they make decisions. As you move further right, you'll see it becomes more and more important. But the generation that's really started to care is my generation, the X generation. It's not just to save the planet, just makes sense, and they're making this buying decisions based on not just the products, but it's something that is factored in to who they do business with, whether it's the products or the companies. So this is, again, you'll see the opportunities. And then the last one is Generation Z. Of course, they're not at the stage right now where they're making these decisions, or they're not homeowners, but they will soon be in coming years.
So the sustainability and buying behaviors combined, how can your audience, how can the kitchen renovation industry turn all this into an opportunity? How can the industry embrace the circular economy, so to speak?
Yeah, well, the first and most important thing is to start having the conversation early in the process. So if you're a kitchen designer, integrate this into your system from the very beginning, where you're asking the customer, hey, what are your options? And I break it down into three options, what I refer to as the 3 R's. They don't always have to replace the cabinets. And in fact, there's obviously a huge market for resurfacing and refacing. But that conversation could be had early on in what I refer to as the idea phase, the pre-construction phase. And those options obviously are paint. So I was talking about my mom earlier. I built her kitchens probably 20 years ago. She wanted it painted, so she used paint and changed the handles. That's very common. And again, 50% are reface. And then there's some other really innovative products, such as there's refacing, which has been around for a while, but there's even cabinet wraps. There's new coatings. There's different materials that you can take the existing cabinets and existing kitchen and then resurface them. So this is the first conversation we have to have, again, in the idea phase, the budgeting phase. The second one is come familiar with these technologies. The calculations is probably the most expensive part of collecting the information. But if the customer can send you a 3D file that has the information on it, you can do some pretty accurate calculations as far as budgeting for that. And then the most important thing is to start to build a local network of deconstruction contractors, appraisers, and nonprofits that will accept those donations. There's a huge tax incentive for homeowners that qualify for it. I'll share this later more in the case study, but this was an event I did just the end of last year here in Northern California, and I had 3 panel experts, and it was not just revealing, but it really capsulize what is going on every day. So I'll start off with Herald Design. This is one of the largest independent renovation companies here in the Bay Area, and they happen to be located in a city that requires the demolition of construction projects to be diverted. And so that's part of the city. In order to get a building permit, there is information that they have to provide in order to get a building permit of what you've diverted. So that was really the message was there, is that working with a local deconstruction contractor, having that conversation early. This will continue to spread throughout the country, but right now in that city, that's required, is to divert 80% of all of your construction debris from the beginning. The second one was a higher-end designer in Marin County, and she expressed that her experiences were very, very common for somebody to what I refer to as fade out before it wore out. Like, there was nothing wrong with the kitchen, and they feel bad. And to know that they can donate that kitchen and divert it from landfill, it really helped her brand. And she wants to have that conversation, but didn't have necessarily the resources and network yet. And then the third person was the Habitat for Humanity. There's 3 or 1,000 restores throughout the U.S. And according to the Habitat for Humanity, she manages the 3 Bay Area stores. It's one of their number 1 selling products. Like, they want used kitchens. They want homeowners to donate their kitchen. They have resales. But one of the things that I wanted to share, what she mentioned, is that's a full set of cabinets with appliances. So there's a strong secondary market with reuse of kitchen cabinets. And then, of course, back to the most important one, and that is having a relationship with an appraiser, so that you can take advantage, or your homeowner can take the advantage of the tax donation. So right out of the gate, they qualify for $5,000, no question asked. But if you have it appraised, you can increase that. There's no limit to that. So it's not uncommon for somebody to get an extra, say, $20,000 or $30,000 of additional money for their budget by donating their kitchen to a local nonprofit. And it doesn't have to be Habitat for Humanity, but they seem to be the most. The challenge with Habitat for Humanity is, like any nonprofit, the process is cumbersome. So
Jim, before you get into your case study, I think, if we were to go back and look at the steps to embrace the circular economy, those 3 steps of the 3 R's, new products and technology, and the importance of a local network. If the industry does those 3 things, what do they get out of that? What's in it for them? How does it benefit them?
Yeah. Well, there's a number of benefits, Mark. The number one is you're repositioning your brand. You can position yourself as somebody that cares about the environment, and that aligns with the customer's values. So there's a number of opportunities by just letting them know in advance that this is what they believe in, and the benefits of going through this process, because it does take more money. It takes a little more time than sending it straight to the dumpster. But so yeah, this is a good example of all the benefits, right? You can earn new clients. There's new revenue streams that are available, and enhances your brand reputation.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Jim. It's interesting stuff. It sounds like a ton of potential in the industry.
Yeah. So I'll share a case study that I think puts this together. So this is a typical kitchen. Home was 20 years old. The cabinets were in good condition, but it faded out before it wore out. Thermal door appliances, empty nesters wanted to redo their kitchen, decided to try to reface it, replace it. Went to some different offers, hired a designer. Designer wanted nothing to do with donating their cabinets. And this would fall in that Generation X category. First process was, hey, let's see if we can get a reface. So Home Depot came out, measured the kitchen, received the estimate. That just didn't make sense. So decided that wasn't something that made sense. So so this is, I think, also a point that back to the technology that right now in the old days, we would take a tape measurement. This is an expensive, cumbersome process. With 3D technologies today, and here's just 3 of them. These companies right now, you can, with a standard mobile phone, capture the kitchen scene, do a real-time mapping of the kitchen, and create a list. But again, the challenge is the deconstruction part, and that's working with a contractor. It's going to take the time to remove the cabinets without damaging them cabinets, and then coordinating with the Habitat for Humanity. Well, they'll come out to your home, pick the cabinets up. This is a typical kitchen, 15 cabinets put in front of the house. That gives you kind of the idea of those truckloads I was telling you about. That's what's going to straight to the landfill. In this case, those cabinets are going to Habitat for Humanity. And this is the process that it requires for Habitat for Humanity to take it. You have to catalog each one of those cabinets, and it's a very cumbersome process. So there's 15 cabinets. And this is my inventor mind, realizing, hey, there's a system in there. We can create something that this could be done all into one platform. And then I worked with Habitat for Humanity. This is a front customer-facing application that we started to build that would allow this all to happen on the mobile phone, going through the different steps. Number 1, deciding they want to remodel their kitchen. Number 2, making the homeowner aware that Habitat for Humanity or other local nonprofits will take that, visit the store, work with the store, have a relationship, determine that the cabinets are reusable. And then again, this is the technology. This is a 3D technology where we could send them that file. They'll have all the 3-dimensional information. They'll also have a itemized list, all automated. So that's an example of the workflow of the kitchen donation process. And this is another example of in the early stages of what is happening kind of in the background. Now, this exchange hasn't been built yet. This is the challenge that I'm asking everybody in the industry to get behind this and understand this. And this is, again, a mock-up. As an inventor, we go through this process of doing a mock-up of what the application would look at. And it would identify the appliances, do a calculation. There's another example of that kitchen before it was removed, of identifying the countertop spaces, all the different cabinets by cataloging that. And there's the list. You can see on the right-hand side, it even calculates the cubic feet and the weight if we wanted it to. So it's identifying each of the cabinets. And again, this is, as an inventor, I see each one of those cabinets is pixels. So it's pixelizing the scene in order to create the 3D model and identifying all the different components. And there's the automatic generated 3D digital twin of that kitchen. So the process, again, there's a number of different technologies. There's even a blockchain technology that could facilitate this. And that takes them through all the different steps. And this is the final workflow that would facilitate the entire capture part of it using a 3D technology, coordinate that with the different trades, and then the designer, and eventually donate it. So I like to wrap up by thanking everybody for their time and invite you personally to my talk that I'm going to be doing at KBIS this year. And that'll be on Tuesday, February 25th from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., room N256. So thanks again for your time and look forward to seeing you in KBIS.
Thank you, Jim, for such a wonderful presentation. We have a few questions from the audience, so we're going to dive right into our Q&A. Do you think certain parts of the country are more interested in this than others?
Without question, it does vary, depending, as I mentioned in the seminar, was the different city ordinances. So depending on the state, the city, there's going to be different variations. But what I think is common, this goes back to the generational shift, is there is more of an awareness for the sustainability, and that these perfectly good products, these kitchens, are going straight to landfill. And again, it's just more of a practical decision that somebody's thinking about before they replace their kitchen. As we know, most of these kitchens fade out before they wear out, and so there's just an awareness of that, and I do think it is something that all parts of the country, and particularly in other parts of the world, Europe especially, is really focused on solving this problem.
Amazing. We have a lot of comments coming in. Next, someone asked, you talked about cabinets, but how about the hardware, functional and decorative? So is that something that's also considered in this process?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, because again, it's not just the cabinets. I focus on the cabinets because, obviously I'm a cabinet maker. I'm in the cabinet business, but the appliances, there's many surfaces that can be repurposed. However, it's not as practical. Cabinets, particularly if it's a modular set of cabinets, have a repurpose. Hardware and things like that would fall more in the recycling. So some of that can be repurposed. But they say the greenest way at least for the environment, is to repurpose something. When you get into hardware and things like that, there's some metal reuse, but there's a labor factor to remove all those and then repurpose those. But super important question, and I value the thought.
Amazing. Sheila asked, kind of going back to your last answer, what do you mean by fade out before they wear out? Can you delve into that a little bit more?
Yeah, no, really super important question. That term comes from the fashion industry. So fashion, actually, they call it fast fashion. People change their clothing not because they need new clothes, because it wears out. And the sad part about it, the kitchen's the same way. The kitchen in most cases is functioning fine. There's nothing wrong with the kitchen. Maybe an appliance goes out and this is again with a mentality change. So fast fashion is a huge polluter everywhere worldwide, and the majority of kitchens are being replaced not because they wore out. It's because the fashion, it's the color, it's the trend. People want to freshen it up and make it look newer. And as a result, it's contributing to this problem of our landfill.
Thank you for that clarification. I think that was a really important take. We're having a conversation in the chat about Europeans and the fact that sometimes they'll take their kitchens with them when they move. Do you think that this is a trend that maybe America is taking note from Europe, or maybe something that we'll see happening more moving forward over here?
Yeah, it's a really value the question, because something to keep in mind, the Europeans have different laws than we do. So in the US, we have what we call real property. So when the cabinets are attached to the home, they become part of the property. In Europe, it's very different, because from the beginning, the cabinets are more like appliances, where the cabinets, in many cases, will be moved from different homes. So when they sell the property, the cabinets are kind of like the furniture. They're expected to be removed and reused. And so it's again, I really appreciate the question, because it goes to show you how different it is. Also, the Europeans, they're smaller kitchens typically, and they're more modularized. So the cabinet companies and the appliance companies are more one of the same. When in the US, it's like a completely different industry, right? The cabinets versus the appliances. Although the Europeans are much better, obviously, at repurposing things because they have less space, and they have also a number of government initiatives to divert things from landfill, and so they're way ahead of us in terms of some of their governance, but also even their technologies. But super important question. We can learn a lot from them. But keep in mind, we're huge as far as the U.S. The size of our markets are, almost a small percentage compared to the Europeans. We are a major contributors to landfill in the U.S. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Someone asked, who are appraisers? How do you find them? What's their official title? What is that process like?
Yeah, again, these are all really good questions. So an appraiser has to be, in order to qualify for this tax deduction, you have to have an IRS approved appraiser. It's an industry, and it does obviously require licensing and that to become an appraiser. And that's not always easy to one, find somebody and then to work with them prior to the demolition. It's come in a coordination of having a contractor that has the ability to remove the cabinets without damaging them, and then having an appraiser that will put a value on them based on their resale value. And there is I just started a LinkedIn group, and I'll start to provide this information because there's some great appraisers out there doing some great work that I'll include in the form. But yeah, it's a professional appraiser. It's no different than any other type of appraiser. It's a whole industry, but they're a property appraiser. Just like there's art appraisers, there's real estate appraisers. There is an industry that appraises building products. And again, I'll provide more information in my LinkedIn form about that.
Amazing. Someone asked, what do you believe is the cost? What do you believe the cost increase in accessibility of finding contractors that delicately remove versus demo? So I believe they're just asking
Mhm.
about price there.
Yeah, because I really like these questions because they're right to the point. Again, another industry that is growing where there is licenses. I know in California there's a specialty license, what's called a deconstruction contractor. There's also independent companies that will certify contractors in removal. So they can go to a 2-day class and get a certification for a removal of construction products. Now, this isn't just kitchens, of course. This is the entire home. So it is a growing industry, and it'll continue to grow because it just makes sense. There's the cost saving. In times it's not actually a cost saving. It costs more to do the deconstruction, even if it's even. If you get a good tax donation, it offsets those costs, so it does work out. But it's not across the board. It's very individual, and sometimes it's just not practical. But yes, you can. And again, I'll start to include this information in my LinkedIn group about local companies that specialize in deconstruction.
Amazing. And then we'll end with this last question. You mentioned Habitat for Humanity. Are there other specific programs or partnerships that help facilitate this? I know you referenced them a few times, but if there's any others that you can tell us on the top of your head.
Yeah, there's a number of associations. I shouldn't say a number of. So there's a few associations that specialize in deconstruction for homes. But there also are many cities. For example, the city of Chicago. I met them at a circularity conference. They're working with local nonprofits, not just Habitat for Humanity, where you can have this exchange, and they'll have a place where the city will provide some resources in order to send these building products to these facilities versus sending them straight to landfill. So there's a lot going on in that area, and I think you'll start to see more in the coming years. It just makes sense. Chicago is a great example because their landfill is at capacity, and they know that construction debris is a huge contributor to that, and they have to solve the problem. The interesting thing about governments is that they use our money to solve these problems. So as we all know, government doesn't have a lot of innovation. That's where we need the industry. We need the people like all of you that are in the business that understand this problem, and then we can bring that to the local governments, and those will have the greatest impact overall. But yeah, all really great questions.
Thank you so much, Jim. I think something like this is super important as we're looking forward, sustainability and what we can do as an industry. So thank you again for that. Before we end today, did you have any final thoughts, remarks for our audience?
Just again, I so much appreciate their time and their attention. If you happen to be at KBIS next week, I'll be speaking about this on Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. At the Voice of the Industry session. So yeah, again, thanks so much. And please follow me on LinkedIn. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to hear your comments.
Amazing. Thank you again, Jim, for presenting today. And thank you to our audience for joining. Until next time, have a good day.
All right. Bye-bye.